of consciousness, how they relate to health, and really probably, excuse me. Okay, looks like we're live on YouTube. Consciousness, how they relate to. So the reason that I wanted to do tonight's class is because I've spent a good amount of time talking about this notion of balancing out your nervous system, where we all have to have sort of every single day 20 to 30 minutes of downtime, because we have this very active state of mind, which is where we are in our fight or flight mode, and we're trying to get things done, and we're focused, on trying to get things done, and we're oftentimes overreacting to small things as if they're an emergency, and our bodies are in this constant state. And I've spent many lectures actually talking about how we need to move into another state of mind, a state of relaxation. Now, we spoke about that from a biological perspective, where we really spoke about the vagus nerve, this nerve that runs from your brainstem all the way down and innervates your organs into your gut. And we spoke about how activating that can induce a state of relaxation, but also it balances out your nervous system. You can think of your nervous system as a seesaw, and that seesaw needs to go back and forth. It can't be all on one side and then never going to the other side. And what we've learned over time is that we don't tend to think of that seesaw having to move during the day. We sort of feel like we get up and we are on the move, and we need to stay in that active state, and we don't need to shift into the relaxation state. But optimal health and maintaining a sense of, feeling good, you need to activate that relaxation. We've spoken about how taking a bath or doing deep breaths can be helpful. And tonight, what we're going to speak about tonight is understanding what those different states of mind are. We've spoken about relaxation. We've spoken about how it's important to get relaxation. But I've often found that when I talk to people about how you have all these different states of mind, then you really can get an understanding of it from a deeper perspective. And it allows you to really realize why and how important it is for you to be able to activate these different states of mind and relaxation. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to go through this. It's a little bit off. It's not as much of a, I guess you could say, biological talk as usual. Having trouble sharing my screen here. Sorry. Give me a moment here while I figure out what's going on. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and try that one more time. Okay, there we go. Let's close some of these down. And if you're having trouble seeing my screen, let me know. And you're getting sort of a preview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Can't seem to close that one down, but that's okay. And let me blow up my screen here and blow this up a little bit. And as always, I see some more people come in. Welcome. We're going to go through these states of mind. Now, it looks really nebulous and scientific, but it won't be. So why is it important? Well, it seems like humans really have a desire to alter their brain waves. We all are certainly aware of, getting a buzz from alcohol, and of course, all the people that are unfortunately suffering from doing all kinds of medications and drugs and abusive drugs. And really, they're doing that because I think there is this innate human desire to want to change your state of mind for whatever the case may be. But one of the things that's important to know is that your body is really undergoing very different changes when you're in these different states of mind. And it's also important to note that, especially if we're focusing our lives on trying to achieve something, then we need to have our minds in a state that is going to cultivate creativity, ability to relax, ability to be in a balanced state of mind. As I said, and we've spoken about from a biological perspective many times, that when you're in this constant on-the-go type of consciousness, and you're in this fight or flight mode all the time, your body completely degrades. You need to enter into that rest and recharge cycle, and you'll get a better, more granular, more specific understanding of what that is as we go through this. As I said, you want to be able to access your subconscious mind. All of us have read about how, we're like it, the analogies are varied. Like, our subconscious mind is like the iceberg, where, our conscious mind is above water, and then below the water is this mass of subconscious. And there's so many things that go on in this subconscious that having an ability to be able to access your subconscious mind just makes your life better, makes you understand yourself better, makes you able to achieve things better. And that's why it's important. Now, throughout history, there are all kinds of stories about people who have accessed all kinds of amazing things while doing things like taking a bath. As an example, Archimedes, we were, all of us in school learned that Archimedes was in his bathtub and he was thinking about buoyancy and all whatever he was thinking about. And he had that eureka moment. He screamed out eureka, and this flash of insight came to him. And they've actually done studies to try to identify in the brain like where this flash of insight comes. That's not important. What's important to realize is that he was in a state of relaxation, and therefore he was open to be able to have more of insight. The structure of benzene, which is that benzene ring that some of you may have remembered, that came to the scientist in a dream. It was a dream where he was trying to come up with the solution, and he saw snakes in his dream that were interlocked in the shape of a benzene. And when he woke up, he understood what the structure must have been. Periodic table occurred also in a period, I think it was also in a dream, where he was trying to come up with the answer, and he just said, I'm going to take a nap. And Einstein, in this one article that I was reading by an expert in Einstein, said that he dreamt that he was riding a sled down a steep, snowy slope, and as he approached the speed of light in his dream, the colors all blended into one. He spent much of his career inspired by that dream, thinking about what happens at the speed of light. So his entire career was really inspired by a dream that he had, and all of his equations, all of the things that he did in his life really come down to that one dream that he had. How remarkable is that? And Paul McCartney, the song Yesterday, we're all familiar with the song Yesterday from the Beatles. Paul McCartney woke up in the morning, and the entire song was in his head, and he just sat down and he was able to write it out. And then of course they put lyrics to it, and of course the rest is history. So we have this untapped ability. Of course, all these people were very smart to begin with. The point is that I think all of us have had a sudden insight in the shower or in the bath or that sort of thing. And so we have this capability of accessing a part of ourselves to be able to really, really get to and solve problems and come up with things. And we all have this capability. So let's go through some of these brainwave states, and we'll talk about them briefly. The beta state is basically normal waking consciousness. What I'm talking to you now in, it's active. Unfortunately, a lot of times it shifts into a fight or flight mode. So it's important that you're really, it's sort of like immediate type of thinking. It's not problem solving type of thinking. It's nothing like that. A caffeine accentuates this. Heavy metal music will unfortunately focus you sometimes too much, and different types of music can affect your brain waves in very specific ways. So there's certain types of music, like Baroque music, can activate the alpha state, which is perhaps one of the reasons why it's good when kids are studying or trying to learn, because it allows them to access a different part of their brain. We'll go through a little bit about what different drugs do to brain waves, just so you can have an understanding of course, we've spoken about before about some of the negative effects of all kinds of different drugs. But in this case, we're focusing on the brain. Now, the alpha state is where you're relaxed. and it's associated with creativity. And it's that situation where you're sort of taking time out to think, and your stress hormones basically start to decrease. And there are lots of ways of sort of activating this. And unfortunately, when we're in a fight or flight mode all day long, it basically means, and I've spoken about in a different way before, I spoke about how when you're in a stress state, we have what is essentially a brainstem, which is sort of like what regulates our thinking, our breathing, all those sorts of functions. And then a little bit further up is sort of this part of our brain that is sort of like an animal. And then we have the third part of the brain, which is really what makes us a thinking human. And when you're in a fight or flight mode, it's like you've decapitated yourself to the animal state because your higher thinking is gone. Well, the same thing happens in this case. When you're constantly in a beta mode, of course, you're capable of doing active, incredible types of thinking and work and such. But unless you're able to activate the alpha state, you're not going to be able to get into that creative state. I think all of us have had that situation, as I mentioned before, that you're taking a shower and you've been thinking about something, or maybe you stopped thinking about it, and you go into the shower and you think, and the thought just sort of pops right into your head. I can tell you that sometimes, most of the time, when I work on putting these talks together, I have certain ideas that I want to put in there. And of course, I lay everything out. And then usually before class, I'll take a shower. And it's amazing that during that shower, oftentimes I'll think to myself, oh, that's a good way of explaining it. Or, oh, I have to add this or that. And it's something that would never occur to me if it wasn't for the shower activating this alpha state. So how can you activate it? Well, believe it or not, just being by the ocean listening to the ocean activates your alpha state. This is one of the reasons why it's so relaxing to be by the ocean, because it's actually physically changing your brain waves from this beta state to an alpha state. Isn't that amazing that just being out in nature, especially the ocean, can activate the alpha state? There are lots of reasons why. Some people think it's the motion of the ocean, the waves, motion of the waves, and that can activate it. Some people say that there's like these different positive ions that are in the air from the crashing of the waves. Whatever the case may be, being in nature, but especially they've done studies by the ocean, that activates your alpha state and puts you into a relaxing alpha state of mind. Any sort of activity that induces wonder. So if you're very much into art and art induces that sense of wonder, being in a museum can be just an incredibly enriching experience, not because you are learning, but because of this sense of wonder that you're getting about this incredible talent that you're seeing. That is going to activate the alpha state. It's the same thing that happens when we become inspired, when we see something that inspires us, or we watch a movie perhaps that inspires us. That can activate the alpha state. Of course, meditation, doing visualization and mental imagery. I can't emphasize enough the power of visualization for various things. There are lots of audio tapes that you can buy that lead you through these imaginary experiences that can really be incredible to help you relax. And relaxing music, of course, can help get you into this alpha state. When people are not in an alpha state and they are depressed, unfortunately, if you activate the alpha state through all these things that just make sense, these are just relaxing types of things. What we're trying to do tonight is just put them into a scientific framework so that it gives you a little bit of inspiration to be able to say, okay, yeah, you know what, I kind of get it. I really do need to do this physical thing to be able to get into a relaxed state. And now I know why. Why is it doing? Why does it do so much? And this is what's important about, to me, that's what's important about what we're talking about. So you get a increase in serotonin, and serotonin makes you feel better. And when people are able to activate this alpha state during the day, getting out of beta state during the day, then that has actually been shown to be associated with a reduction in depression. So we're talking about real biological effects here that go beyond just sort of this idea that it's like a brainwave. of course, it really is common sense, isn't it? I mean, if we really think about it, it's common sense. But having a scientific explanation, again, just it gives you a little bit more inspiration to be able to make sure that you are actively working to incorporate these things. Okay, let's move on to the theta state. So theta state is something that happens during deep meditation and also light sleep. And it's also found when you are on a road, interestingly. Like all of you have probably had the experience where you are, perhaps you do the same drive to work every day. And you drive the entire way and you think to yourself, I don't even remember doing that drive. I remember my father once saying when he would have an hour commute back and forth to his medical office. And on occasions when he would drive home, he would say, I don't even remember driving home. Like it becomes so automatic. And the reason it is because your body is capable of doing that drive, which frees up your mind to shift into a different state of consciousness. In this case, it shifts into the theta state. And believe it or not, a great deal of good ideas can come when you're in the theta state. And it's not uncommon. Maybe some of you have had the experience of sort of enjoying a routine drive because, you're not being disturbed, you're in your car, you're on a familiar road. Well, really what's happening is that your brain is now, your body is taking over and your brain is shifting into a different state of consciousness. And as I said, ideas can come. It can make you contemplate your life. Some people feel, they feel like they're thinking deeper about their life or about situations when they're on these drives. And it is what some people say, this still small voice. In the Bible, it speaks about this still small voice, that when we get into these deep, relaxed moments, and you can feel sort of this inner voice of inspiration or inner voice of conscience that starts speaking to you, not in some, unusual way, just, that small, still inner voice of your conscience, or however you want to define it, that's happening sort of in a theta state. Then we have delta, and delta is very deep meditation, also dreamless sleep. And your brain is not just in this mode at all times. Your brain can have a mix of all these different types of things going on. We're making it very simple, just so you have a clear understanding of it. Very deep meditation, dreamless sleep. This is important because when you regularly cycle and you have normal cycles of sleep, when you're going through different cycles of sleep, if you miss out on the delta wave, delta state, then you can have a decrease in immune function. So one of the reasons why, if you're not getting good night's sleep, there's lots of reasons why that can affect your immune system. But one of them is because when your brain shifts into a certain state, it has a very profound effect on your entire body. Unfortunately, we still are under this mistaken notion that the brain and the body are separate. They are so integrated, and it's very important to understand that we need to pay attention to these states, because not just because of what we've been speaking about, but because they have profound effects on your biological function. In this case, we're talking about the immune system. And it's sort of, delta is sort of the gate to the unconscious mind. Now, when you put a measuring device called an EEG on people who are deep meditators, and in some cases, there are certain technologies that we'll talk about in just a moment that these deeper states. And what's amazing is that, when people do deep meditation, sometimes, they get to these states where they feel, at one with the universe, and they have sort of these transcendental religious type experiences. Well, what's amazing is you can actually take someone, a normal person who's not used to deep meditation, and through some technologies bring them to a delta or a theta state, and they describe the exact same experiences of feeling at one and feeling optimal and healthy and connected, all these sorts of things. And that can actually be precipitated in people, induced, which is very interesting. Then there's the gamma state. Now, different cultures throughout history have spoken a lot about different types of consciousness. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those, but just as an example, in the Jewish tradition, there are, and the reason that it's reason that states of consciousness are spoken about in certain traditions is because of this deeper sense of connectedness that people get when they are praying. And in the Jewish tradition, there's actually 32 states of consciousness. And there's even one book that describes over 200 states of consciousness. And so lots of different ancient traditions have a very specific and well-defined type of definitions when it comes to consciousness. And it's important to note that when it comes to meditation and this sort of getting into these different types of states, many people don't realize, but the Old Testament prophets didn't just wake up and start prophesizing or whatever the case may be. There were actually schools of meditation that they went to. Most people in states and altered state able to study this sort of thing. Which actually I had twice when I was an intern. I entered this state because I was probably sleep deprived. I was working overnight at the hospital every fourth night, and I came back after a 36-hour shift, and I went to take a nap, and I developed what was called sleep consciousness, where first I was awake, but I wasn't able to move my body. Visual type of hallucinations. But it's also something that has been used for creativity, especially around the time of Thomas Edison, where certain businessmen would also do this. In the book Think and Grow Rich, which is sort of a very well-known book, he talks about a guy who would go into his concentration room to come up with ideas, and in between him staying awake and falling asleep, he would come up with ideas. That's the same thing here, where he would, these people like Salvador Dali and Thomas Edison, Edgar Allan Poe, they would nap with a steel ball in their hands, and then they would wake when their ball hit the floor, so that they could actually get into that sort of middle ground to be able to have a creative outburst, because of this different state of consciousness. So I thought that was interesting. Flow state has been described a lot over the last probably 30 years. And hold on one moment. Looks like we lost my share. 1 second. Sorry about this. Looks like we have a little problem here. 1 moment. So this flow state has been spoken about quite a bit. And it's basically this state where everything just is sort of going the way you want it to go. Give me 1 moment while I figure out what happened here. 1 second. Okay, let's try this one more time. If you can see my screen, let me know. I don't think you can see my screen. Here we go. Okay. You should be able to see my screen now. Blow this up a little bit. So this heightened state of mind where you sort of lose, where everything's going the way you want it to go, and you sort of lose sense of who you are. You are in just go mode. Michael Jordan used to go into these flow states where, everything he hit, everything he shot would go into the hoop. And, this sense of self is less. You're just in go mode. Your inner critic that we all have is just completely gone. You are just confident, moving, and in this different state. We've all had that situation. Also, there's a lot of endorphins that get released as well. So there are a lot of books that have been written on how do we achieve this flow state. And a lot of people have sort of idealized it in a sense, that it's like the optimal state of consciousness. I think that's sort of overblown. That one of the things I'm trying to describe is the fact that we all need to sort of cycle through all these different states at different times because they all have different functions. There was a very popular book in the 60s called Flow, written by this psychologist from Hungary, I think, that talked at length about the flow state. Lucid dreaming is another state of consciousness where people wake up inside their dreams. And there are books written about that and about how people would use it to be able to solve problems. Like if they would, if they had a scientific problem, they would dream of asking Albert Einstein, and because you're in this altered state and you have access to greater creativity in your subconscious, then just like those people who had those insights in their dreams, the same, you can sort of precipitate that by learning how to do lucid dreaming. And there was a book, and this has been around for many, many years. They've done quite a bit of research on this for human performance, I believe at Stanford. And even to the point where they're able to have someone go into a lucid dream and communicate back to the lab through their eye movements. Because when you're in REM sleep and you're dreaming, your eyes move the way you would look in the dream. They've actually confirmed that. So they would be able to have subjects who were trying to, go into a lucid dream for a purpose, and then they would signal with movement of their eyes back to the lab. Synesthesia is another state of consciousness that is where people have their, for example, if there are people who, when they hear music, they see colors. And this is something that's very common, excuse me, in artists. And you can understand why some of these really bizarre, crazy kinds of looking art, some of these artists probably had synesthesia where they would hear things and they would see as a result of hearing. And actually in the Bible, believe it or not, there is at the foot of Mount Sinai, actually says in the Bible that during the revelation at Sinai, believe it or not, it says that the people saw the sounds. So it appears that during that, whatever event that was, there was sort of this mass shift in consciousness and people were having this synesthetic experience. I read a book. I was dating an artist and we were discussing this synesthesia, and she actually got me a book on synesthesia in art. And it was a very interesting book about how people are just born. Some people are just born with this ability, this sort of altered state that they can access, where sometimes the senses crisscross. And one of the most amazing stories was of a kid who was synesthetic. And when you gave him a number, he would be able to see the number as like a form, like a 34 would look one way and 52 would look another way. And he was a math genius. And what was amazing was he would be, if they said, what's 34 times 52? He would see the images, whatever they were, of 34 in whatever shape it was, and then he'd see the other number, and they would sort of merge together, and he would be able to see a new image, and he knew what that number was. That was how he did calculations. So there are these really remarkable types of things that are part of the human experience that we don't know anything about. And they are natural. They have been recorded throughout history. And one of the reasons I find it so interesting is because it allows us to be able to see a certain aspect of ourselves. You know, obviously, most of us are not synesthetic. Most of us are not doing lucid dreaming. But we all have the capability of accessing our subconscious mind. And we do that first by working on relaxation. And as you work on relaxation, we'll talk a little bit more about how briefly how to do that, but we spoke about, you know, it could just be breathing, counting your breaths, or visualization, or whatever the case may be. But as you embark on a regular practice of relaxation, that relaxation can go deeper and deeper and potentially get into activating these other states during waking hours. And that is going to be associated with the same benefits as someone who sits and meditates. Not all of us are going to be meditators. It's, you know, meditation is often associated with things from India and the East, and a lot of people in the West are not necessarily comfortable with that. The point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to be a meditator. You don't have to enter an ashram to be able to learn how to relax and to understand why it's important to be able to learn to relax from a mental state as well as a biological state. And we've certainly spoken about that before. So these are very interesting other sorts of states. So how do we enter these states? Well, meditation, obviously, there are all kinds of different types of meditation. If you have a regular practice of prayer, if you're a Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever the case may be, there's always morning prayers. And the importance of ritual is not just something that was invented by the people of these religions. It is something that we've spoken about before, that it's not a question of if you have a prayer, but you absolutely must, a ritual. And that ritual could be that you wake up and you make your bed and you brush your teeth, whatever the case may be. It's important for everyone to develop a habit, a pattern, because when you get into a pattern, you're able to access these other states. Obviously, if you're then able to enter into a state of relaxation, which could be inspirational reading or something that really that is internally directed, or you're just doing prayer of some sort, regularly going through the same type of prayer over and over again is going to be able to very much be like putting you in that routine so that it can free up and open up parts of your mind to access, your subconscious mind. Controlled breathing, we've spoken about resonant breathing before, which is basically where, and we'll speak about it probably in another lecture, but resonant breathing, essentially, to sum it up, is where your breathing sort of synchronizes with your heartbeat. And when your breathing and your heart synchronize, believe it or not, your heart is able really powerfully to affect your brain waves. There's an amazing connection between your heart and your brain, which is fascinating and is worth an entire talk. But we don't really realize how much of a almost sensory organ our hearts are, and how much it affects our brain, our emotions. Of course, in mythology and in all traditions around the world, the heart has always been the source of emotion. And what's amazing is there's an organization called the Heart Math Institute. It's an unusual name, but they have amazing scientific studies to show how your heart and the rhythm of your heart is associated with so many different things in your body that affect your brain. But resonant breathing is where you're basically synchronizing your breathing with your heart rate. And it's usually 5 or 6 breaths per minute. I've spoken about the breathing app. which basically gives you a tone. And you can, again, this is probably the easiest type of breathing, or you can call it meditation, where you're basically just controlling your breath and you're doing around 6 breaths per minute. And that is, can be a very powerful thing, very, very powerful thing. And Sharon's mentioning that Yitzhak Perlman has synesthesia. I did not know that. Isn't that interesting? Many artists definitely have synesthesia. That's very interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. You know, if you were to describe synesthesia to someone, you would say that person's nuts, until you learn more about it. And you see how so many artists, and not just artists, but as I said, this mathematics whiz, and of course, reports in cultures like, as I mentioned in the Bible, where they're at the foot of Mount Sinai and they see the sounds. This sort of thing, again, if you didn't hear, if I just said some people see sounds, you think, well, there must be something wrong. But this is something that is part of the human experience forever. And probably Yitzhak Perlman, being, of course, having the brain of an artist, an accomplished one at that, it doesn't surprise me. But thank you, Sharon, for sharing that. That's very interesting. Okay, so next is binaural beats. Binaural beats is a technology where they put one tone into one ear and then another tone into the other ear, and the two tones cancel themselves out, and that can change your brain waves. I don't recommend any of these types of things, from binaural beats to neurofeedback to, obviously, I don't recommend drugs. I don't think you can really get transcranial magnetic stimulation, but I believe that all of us have this capability. And one of the ways we do it should just be through prayer or controlled breathing, or non-religious meditation types, if that's something that you're interested in. But I think prayer and controlled breathing and imagery and visualization is really the way to go to be able to access these states. Nonetheless, there are all kinds of apps and organizations that create these binaural beats to dial in to specific types of brainwaves. You can, get a CD that puts one tone in one ear, one tone in the other, and can, zap you into, delta and alpha states. Again, I think you should focus on doing it other ways, because I believe that that's sort of the way, humans have done it forever. And this is sort of new and not something I officially recommend. Neurofeedback, of course, all of us have heard of feedback. That was popular in the 80s, early 80s, I think in the 70s as well. But now they have neurofeedback devices where you can put these on your brain, and you can work to get into certain brainwave states to help with types of things. So as an example, I don't recommend this either. There have been, just anecdotally, I've heard of situations where people were able to move their brainwaves in such a way that it was not helpful for them. So again, this sort of organic way of, simple breathing, meditation, and prayer, I think that's really the way to go. Now, drugs, obviously, I'm not a fan of. I just want to share how drugs affect your brainwaves. Cocaine, obviously, you can imagine the situation of cocaine putting you into that hyperactive beta state. Marijuana can put you in an alpha state. Caffeine, nicotine, it suppresses alpha. Obviously, helps you puts you into a beta state, which means that if you're overdosing or using caffeine too much, you're not going to be able to enter into the relaxed alpha state, where creativity and those sorts of places arise. Alcohol, immediately it gives you some alpha, that relaxed state, but over time with chronic use, unfortunately, it causes decreased alpha, meaning decreased ability to have creativity and relaxation, and increases beta. Lithium, some theta and beta, and narcotics, all alpha, but of course, none of these, as far as I'm concerned, including marijuana, none of these, in my mind, are beneficial in any way. And I've made known my negative opinion of marijuana, because I feel as though people are, I don't judge, like I don't mind that people do it, but I don't think it's certainly not for me and for people I work with. Controlled breathing, prayer, or meditation, imagery, visualization, all these are really much healthier, and they allow you to organically grow through the experience. As an example, with visualization and mental imagery, which I've studied extensively, it's an exercise in your imagination. And when you exercise your imagination grows, and your ability to enter into relaxed states and to use your imagination as an example to help your life grows as well. So these are organic and these are artificial. But as I stated in the beginning, there seems to be some human desire to activate different brain waves. Of course, we're seeing a lot of people experimenting with psychedelics now, and they probably do have some sort of role in therapy. But that would be, of course, a subject of another talk. So that is really what I wanted to cover. Let's just pull back here a little bit and just summarize a little bit about what we spoke about tonight. So my goal for you tonight was really to understand why it's important that you understand that your brain naturally has all this complexity to it, that we're not just awake and we're not just asleep, which is what most people, that's what we think of, generally speaking, and we act that out in life. Okay, we're awake now, I have to go to sleep. What I've spent a lot of time over many, many weeks talking about is the biological need for entering that relaxed state. And now tonight, I wanted to share with you why it's important from a brainwave state, that we need to cycle through all of these different states. Theta, delta, obviously we go through with normal sleep cycles, but those can also be activated to your benefit, brain-wise and biologically, by really cultivating the relaxation experience during waking hours. Then we spoke a little bit about other states of mind, of consciousness. There are many. And then we spoke a little bit about how to enter these states and why it's important. So that is really what I wanted to cover. We lasted a lot more time than I thought about, a little bit more esoteric than I'm used to talking about, but I really do believe, and certainly with people I've worked with, that once they get a little bit of a better understanding of the need to go into these states, besides just the feeling that, oh, I need to relax more, it really allows them to take the time to be able to incorporate some kind of relaxation strategy that's going to help them in this regard. So as always, thank you for your attention. And next week, we'll be getting back to more, I guess, biological type things. We're going to talk a little bit about what are called senescent cells, which are these crazy cells that as you get older, they show up, they release all these crazy bad chemicals into your body. They don't do any good for anyone. They are associated with aging, and how to get rid of them. These, when you hear about a senescent cell, which is wreaking havoc on your body as you get older, and you slowly get more of them, you think it's the craziest thing that your body would do such a thing, to create a cell that basically destroys all the cells around it. So next week, we'll talk a little bit about that and how to wipe them out. And so that this will be a very important anti-aging and aging gracefully type of technique, using food and lifestyle and select supplements. And I think it's a very important one for you to understand for aging gracefully, let's call it that. So thank you again for your attention. I wish everyone a good night, stay safe, and thank you again for your attention. Have a great night.